Hello, I'm Larry Wilson. Please join me for another 15-minute Bible study on the Jubilee Calendar. Today, this is part 3 of 6. Thus far, we have investigated some of the mechanical aspects of the Jubilee Calendar. You now know how months and years were calculated using the sun and the moon. Given the complexities and fractions caused by orbital geometry, and having no instruments other than the naked eye, God's Jubilee Calendar is an awesome creation in its own right, because it is always self-correcting every month. Consider this. Every 19 years, the sun and moon return to a fixed starting point. Well, I should say they come very close. Because the Jubilee Calendar is self-correcting every month, as necessary, the ancients did not have to worry about cumulative error within the Jubilee Calendar. During a 19-year cycle, they knew that 2 years would occur back-to-back, having 13 new moons. This natural occurrence did not create a problem because, once again, the Jubilee Calendar does not have cumulative error. For fun, let's look at the math. 19 solar years using scientific instruments amount to 6,939.607 days. And we notice that in the same time period, 235 lunar months at 29.5305 days per lunar cycle also equals 6,939.667 days. So 19 solar years and 235 lunar months scientifically have the same number of days, and if we round up to calendar days, that's 6940. But there is a small difference. Notice the .607 and the .667. This difference of .06 days represents a drift of about 86 minutes per 19 years between the sun and the moon, and this cumulative error was repaired in the Jubilee Calendar every 319 years. You see, God's Jubilee Calendar constantly corrects and aligns itself as time goes by, and it is never out of sync with the sun or moon at any given time by more than 1 day. So summarizing what we've learned thus far about the mechanicals of the Jubilee Calendar, we know, A, the Jubilee Calendar does not require knowledge of orbital geometry. It is constantly self-correcting. It requires faithful record-keeping and observation. It is not concerned with fractions of time. And the Jubilee Calendar is perfect for agriculture in every part of the world other than the North and South Poles, which have unusual growing seasons. And finally, the Jubilee Calendar never lags or gets ahead of the growing seasons. 1,400 years before Julius Caesar came along, God gave Israel an amazing calendar which stayed in perfect sync with both the sun and the moon, and its accuracy enables students of Bible prophecy to pinpoint certain fulfillments which point us to the second coming of Jesus. It is no accident that the calendar which allows us to date Christ's first coming and his death is directly connected to his second coming. Now that the arrival and measurement of months and years has been discussed, let's investigate the Jubilee Calendar's cycle of years. We're going to read from Leviticus 25, verse 1. The Lord said to Moses on Mount Sinai, "Speak to the Israelites and say to them, when you enter the land I'm going to give you, the land itself must observe a Sabbath to the Lord. For 6 years sow your fields, and for 6 years prune your vineyards and gather their crops. But in the 7th year the land is to have a Sabbath of rest, a Sabbath to the Lord. Do not sow your fields or prune your vineyards. Do not reap what grows of itself, or harvest the grapes of your untended vines. The land is to have a year of rest. Do not reap. We will notice this shortly, the importance of that word. Verse 6, whatever the land yields during the Sabbath year will be food for you, for yourself, your manservant and maidservant, and the hired worker and the temporary resident who lives among you, as well as for your livestock and the wild animals in your land. Whatever the land naturally produces during the 7th year may be eaten, but not reaped. Now let's make sure that we understand all that God has said. The first point, 3 months to the very day after leaving Egypt, according to Exodus 19:1, Israel arrived at the base of Mount Sinai, and this is where God gave these instructions. And God said, in verse 2 of Leviticus 25, when you enter the land I am going to give you, the land itself must observe a Sabbath to the Lord. Upon reading Leviticus 25:2, many people assume that God meant that Israel should begin counting off 7-year cycles upon entering the promised land. But this assumption produces insurmountable problems. I will explain these problems later on. For now, I want you to consider a question. What year do you think should be used as year 1 when calculating God's Sabbath years? Is it the year of the Exodus from Egypt, or the year of entrance into Canaan? The question of dating the Sabbath years, the 7th year, and its cycles of 7 years, is highly important, because the moment we date one Sabbath year, all other Sabbath years become dated as well. For reasons that will be forthcoming, God's 7th year Sabbath dates from the year of the Exodus. The date of the Exodus is year 1 in the same way that God's 7th-day Sabbath dates from the first day of creation, which was day 1. I will fully demonstrate later on why this is the correct answer, but for now, here's a very short explanation. It is beyond reasonable argument, and we discovered this in seminar number 310, that Jesus died in AD 30. And according to Daniel 9, Jesus died in the middle year of the 70th week. Therefore, AD 33 becomes a Sabbath year. Look at this little chart. Jesus died in AD 30. He began his ministry in AD 27, which is the first year of the 70th week. And the 70th week begins with the Sunday year, Monday year, Tuesday year, and Wednesday year is the middle of the week. So once we align and once we know that Jesus died in the middle of the week, and we know that that year is AD 30, and that is beyond reasonable argument, then we know that Sabbath years are always going to align with year AD 33. Because Jubilee cycles are unbroken and perpetual, when one day of a Jubilee week is aligned with a known year, all Jubilee days, years, and weeks can be calculated forward and backward for thousands of years. So this is why the dating of Christ's death becomes so crucial to the Jubilee calendar, because it tells us where all the Sabbath years are going to be located. forward and backward. More will be said about this matter, but we must continue forward for now. And in case you've forgotten, we are evaluating Leviticus 25, verses 1 through 7, and we're ready to examine verses 3 and 4. God said, "For 6 years sow your fields, and for 6 years prune your vineyards and gather their crops. But in the 7th year the land is to have a Sabbath of rest, a Sabbath to the Lord. Do not sow your fields or prune your vineyards." Now many scholars and pastors have claimed that sabbatical years were an agricultural issue, that God wanted Israel to allow the land to lay fallow and recover after 6 years of harvesting. But the Bible plainly refutes this. Jumping down to Leviticus 25, verse 20, God is speaking, and he says to Israel, "You may ask, what will we eat in the 7th year if we do not plant or harvest our crops?" Verse 21, "I will send you such a blessing in the 6th year that the land will yield enough for 3 years. That would be years 7, 8, and 9. Verse 22, "While you plant during the 8th year," remember the 7th year is a sabbatical year, so they start planting in the 8th year. "While you plant during the 8th year, you will eat from the old crop," that is year 6, "and will continue to eat from it until the harvest of the 9th year comes in." God's Sabbath year rest had nothing to do with agriculture. If the land had been depleted after 6 years of planting and harvesting, why would it produce more in the 6th year than ever before? Claiming the 7th year Sabbath rest was an agricultural issue is contrary to Scripture. God's reasons for implementing 7th year Sabbath rests are awesome. They were both physical and spiritual. Let's notice the physical part. God commanded Israel to observe a vacation year from working the ground every 7th year. How thoughtful! To increase their faith in Him and their love for Him, He not only commanded that they should take off a whole year, He gave them enough food for 3 upcoming years before the Sabbath year began. God demonstrates His goodness and His love to Israel before requiring them to take a year off. God is very considerate and mindful that human beings are made of dust, and that we are naturally rebellious to His commands. And this is why Paul noticed and wrote about this in Romans 2:4, that it is God's kindness that leads us to repentance. Okay, let's look a little higher and consider the spiritual side of the 7th year Sabbath rest for the land. When Adam and Eve were created, they were placed in the garden of God, that is, the Garden of Eden. And this may come as a surprise, but the Bible teaches that the Garden of Eden existed before the world was created. This special garden was brought to earth and presented to Adam and Eve as a gift. God gave it to them, and it naturally produced everything they could want. Adam and Eve, and this is a critical point, did not have to work the ground with painful toil in order to survive, because Eden naturally produced everything they could want. They ate whatever grew of itself. But Adam and Eve sinned, and as a result, several horrible things took place. Here are 2. Number 1, they were driven out of Eden, and the door was locked behind them. I believe the Garden of Eden was eventually returned to heaven. Number 2, and this is the critical point I want you to focus on, the ground was cursed and survival outside Eden was only possible through painful toil. I want you to notice the curse that comes from God's own lips. Genesis 3:17. To Adam, God said, "Because you listened to your wife and ate from the tree about which I commanded you, you must not eat of it. Cursed is the ground because of you. Through painful toil you will eat of it all the days of your life. It will produce thorns and thistles for you, and you will eat the plants of the field." Verse 19, "By the sweat of your brow you will eat your food until you return to the ground, since from it you were taken, for dust you are, and to dust you will return." And that's a strong curse. So does the expulsion of Adam and Eve from Eden and the painful toil that comes from working the ground to survive have anything to do with God's Sabbath day, every seventh day, and God's seventh-year Sabbath rest in Canaan? Absolutely. God wanted Israel to study and investigate a number of spiritual lessons every Sabbath, as well as every seventh year. Please bear with me for a few minutes while I explain a prophetic signpost which God gave to Israel. After Adam and Eve sinned, God graciously declared there would be a way back to Eden. The way back home, though, would come through Jesus. Jesus would come to earth and die for sinners, and all who surrender to his teachings and put their faith in him will someday be granted access to the garden of God, where painful toil is not required for survival. Okay, let's zoom forward from Adam and Eve down to the time of Abraham. God revealed a wonderful plan to Abraham. God informed Abraham about 2,000 years after Adam and Eve that he wanted to establish his kingdom on earth prior to the death of Jesus. There would be nothing on earth like the kingdom and the garden of God, and everyone who wished to live in God's kingdom would not have to work the ground through painful toil in order to survive. And this is why Hebrews 11:8 says, "By faith Abraham, when called to go to a place he would later receive as his inheritance, obeyed and went, even though he did not know where he was going. By faith he made his home in the promised land like a stranger in a foreign country. He lived in tents, as did Isaac and Jacob, who were heirs with him of the same promise." Verse 10, "For he, Abraham, was looking forward to the city with foundations, whose architect and builder is God." God chose a special piece of ground where he planned to establish his kingdom. God also told Abraham that he wanted his descendants to serve in his kingdom as priests. And this is why God commanded Moses to say in Exodus 19:5, "Now if you obey me fully and keep my covenant, then out of all nations you will be my treasured possession. Although the whole earth is mine, you will be for me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation." God intended, after teaching a few generations of Israel his ways, to turn the promised land into his kingdom. Canaan would become a land that truly flowed with milk and honey. Exodus 3:8. I have covered this topic in considerable detail in a video series on the book of Hebrews, and it's posted on YouTube. Just do a search for Larry Wilson Hebrews, and you can see it. So I will not elaborate on this matter other than to say that at the Exodus, God created the seventh-year Sabbath rest for the land to serve as a prophetic signpost, pointing Israel to the promise he made to Abraham. Every 7 years, He wanted Israel to notice the fact that one day he would establish his rest, and this rest would be a release from painful toil in the land, just as he promised to Abraham. But what did Israel do? They actually made God furious with their continual rebellion, and he refused to set up his kingdom in the land promised to Abraham and his descendants. And this is why God said of Israel in Psalm 95:10, "For 40 years I was angry with that generation. I said, they are a people whose hearts go astray, and they have not known my ways. So I declared on oath in my anger, they shall never enter my rest." Now that you understand something of the physical and spiritual lessons involved with the seventh-year Sabbath imposed on the land, the following 3 verses should take on a whole new meaning. Leviticus 25, verse 5. We're talking about the Sabbath year. During the Sabbath year, do not reap what grows of itself, or harvest the grapes of your untended vines. The land is to have a year of rest. But whatever the land yields during the Sabbath year, verse 6, will be food for you, for yourself, your manservant and maidservant, and the hired worker and temporary resident who lives among you. Verse 7, as well as for your livestock and the wild animals in your land. Whatever the land produces may be eaten. God's commands may sound contradictory at first, but they aren't. You see, reaping the fields during the 7th year is not the same thing as eating whatever grows of itself. Reaping is the culmination of painful toil. First, there was the plowing, then the sowing, then comes the reaping, and then the storing. But eating whatever grows of itself is painless. It's just a matter of taking whatever is on the vine. The eating whatever grows of itself parallels the original Garden of Eden experience, and eating whatever grows of itself experience also pointed forward to God's promise to establish His rest from painful toil on earth. So we see that in a physical sense, God's 7th-year Sabbath was for the land, designed to increase Israel's faith in God and their love for God. And in a spiritual sense, the Sabbath year rest was a prophetic signpost, pointing to His plan to establish His kingdom on earth before Jesus was born. Well, I'm out of time, way over time. Please bookmark and share this video with your friends and proceed to the next segment.